Election 2011 coverage on Manx Radio.
This morning in the studio, the man who's been Speaker for 5 years of the Keys, standing once again in Garff, that lengthy East Coast constituency that winds up between Douglas and Ramsey. Steve-Rodan, 57 years old, a pharmacist, married, 2 daughters, educated in Scotland, first elected in Garff in 1995 at the by-election, has been Minister for Education and Minister for Health. And has been on many committees. Joins us in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Rodan.
Morning, John.
He elected Speaker in 2006, stood for the presidency a week ago but lost out to Claire Christian. Does being Speaker alter your role as an MHK in a constituency?
No, not in the sense of one's ability to represent constituents, because the Speaker very clearly has an ongoing important role in Tynwald and is freely able to both speak in debate, serve in committees, vote for or against government in the interests of his constituents.
But how much do you have to retain the status quo in your thinking?
No, there's no question of that. One is able to act politically completely freely in Tynwald. It is, of course, in the House of Keys where one has a neutral presiding role, although I still retain a vote even in the House of Keys.
Well, let's look at it at the other side. Does it benefit a constituency to have the Speaker as its member?
I think in many senses my constituents value the role that they have as their representative, somebody in what is a very important role within the island and able to operate at all sorts of levels in the island. And I sense constituents are rather proud of that.
Well, in the reciprocal health agreement battle, you stepped out, very much out of the shadows, and took a prominent role. The government mismanaged that one badly, didn't they?
Yes, it was not government's finest hour. Whatever they may say, the key to unlocking the face-to-face discussions which eventually took place with the new Secretary of State for Health in London to cause the reversal of the agreement was through political pressure at Westminster.
Well, our ministers are frightened to confront their ministers.
And that pressure at Westminster was brought about by contacts at the highest level from this end, particularly in the shape of Andrew McKinley, who had had a first-name relationship with Andy Burnham and was able to directly confront him on behalf of the Isle of Man government and say, look, before you do anything irrevocable that's unfair to the people of the Isle of Man and people in the UK, for heaven's sake, have a meeting.
But once we got to Andy Burnham, things seemed to change. And shouldn't that have happened in the first place?
Well, one can argue that because Andy Burnham had been in office for 6 months before this meeting took place. And the reason we have politicians and the reason we have telephones is for one to use the other and cut through any deadlock that had arisen, and it clearly had arisen, at officer and civil servant level.
We've had Mr Gorn proposing that perhaps the scope of government should now change. You're against privatisation. You don't want wholesale privatisation.
I think we have to be very, very careful because there are many services in this country which are hopelessly uneconomic if run by the private sector. So in principle, having government control over such services, such as transport services, the buses and so on, is correct in principle. Now, whether government itself are the right people to run such operations is open to question.
Because a lot of people say government operations are very inefficient in a lot of areas.
And a lot of it is to do with the structures that we have in place. So, yes, the scope of government and what government itself actually does and controls should be looked at the next House, but done so sitting down very clearly both with the private sector and indeed with the unions and Labour representatives to see if there are alternative ways of doing these services, because we will certainly have to look right across the board at the way we do things.
Garff electors, what's bothering them on the doorstep?
I think the concerns that are felt nationally, concerns for jobs, employment prospects, the direction the Isle of Man economy is going. At a more local level, what's very exciting, particularly in Laxey, is we're taking full part in the new government regeneration initiatives, which will take a little bit of time, but this is something I'm very enthusiastic about because it gives us the opportunity to act across government and with local community in a coordinated fashion to put the resources in where they make the most impact. impact.
Just quickly, you brought one of the people who brought in the 16 to 17 voting. Did it work last time? Is it going well?
Yes, I think that is a hugely exciting innovation. Isle of Man again pioneering social advance of this sort, the way we did votes for women in 1881, and has been copied in a number of other countries. So
it's been a success. Mr. Rodan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's 8 o'clock.